Okay, so I think we can start the seminar now. So I would like to welcome our speakers today to the 13th Fenix Infrastructure webinar. Today we have two female speakers. So we have Anna Lörs and Valentina Armutza from Forschungszentrum Jülich. So I'd like to thank her both to today's webinar. And also I'd like to, if it actually allows me to continue the slides, or sorry for the technical issues here. Can't actually change the, hold on, I'll stop sharing and share again. I'd like to warn all attendees that this webinar is being recorded, and the final recorded version will be available on the Human Brain Project YouTube channel, as well as on the Fenix website. The structure of the webinar is the following one. So first of all, I will give the floor to the two speakers. And towards the end of the webinar, I will explain as well a little bit more about the Fenix calls that they are up and running, as well as a little bit of, I will hand over a webinar and a survey about the so that attendees will be able to evaluate the webinar, and the questions can be raised either from the attendees, both on the chat, and we will address them when the speakers will allow us, or they can also be addressed by email towards the end of the session. And I think that's it from my side. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll give the floor to our two speakers. So thank you very much for coming.
Can you see the screen? Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, Renata, for the introduction, and welcome everybody to this Fenix Infrastructure webinar on how to request resources through JARDS. So today we would like to give you an overview regarding the application process. Then Anna will describe how to apply for resources by using JARDS. And then I will be happy to show you how to perform a technical or scientific assessment by using JARDS. But let's talk about the application process. There are different kinds of resources that the Fenix infrastructure offers. These are the scalable and interactive computing services, the virtual machine services, and the archival and active data repositories. So 5 of the supercomputing centers that have joined the Fenix infrastructure offer this kind of resources. And these are the Jülich Supercomputing Center in Germany, the CSCS in Switzerland, the Cineca in Italy, the Barcelona Supercomputing Center in Spain, and the CEA in France. All the available resources are listed on the Fenix website, so please have a look at them. So regarding the user access to the Fenix infrastructure, we can say that the Fenix infrastructure is open to users at different levels and from multiple user communities. It's possible to get these resources, and the access is free of charge and granted to users through an excellence-based peer review procedure. So at the moment, for the two communities that I'm going to show you, there are 2 access procedures. So for HBP members, EBRAINS users, and neuroscientists, there are continuous calls, so proposals can be submitted at any time. For European researchers from any community, there are quarterly praise IC calls. It's important to mention that the allocation committees are independent from the Fenix infrastructure providers. And for any information regarding how to get access to resources, please visit the access page on the Fenix website. Today, we will be happy to show you the application process for HPP EBRAINS. So regarding the resource allocation procedure, so who can apply for resources? Well, European researchers, so they can be PIs as well as PhD students, and the usage of resources is free of charge. The application process starts with the submission of a proposal through the new online application system. So Anna will describe more about this, but there it's important to describe the research project, the amount of resources they're going to be requested, and how resources will be used to achieve the scientific goals. After that, so after finalizing the submission of the proposal, a technical assessment is necessary. And depending on the amount of requested resources, also a scientific review is foreseen. For HPP IC call, a shortened procedure for small-scale projects is foreseen, and this is based on the fact that no scientific review and also other additional steps are required. The decision is made by the allocation committee, and the applicants usually receive notifications about the review results. It's possible to get these resources within 1-2 months, but it's important to say that the procedure is flexible. So resources can be made available to a project before a final decision is made. So for sure, for any questions about the available resources, the review process, and the status of your request and the allocation procedure, you can contact our office. And of course, we can support you also with the preparation of project proposals. Now I will leave the floor to Anna. I will stop sharing.
Are there any questions to Valentina's part so far? Okay.
I can't see anyone, no.
Okay, then let's start with my part. You should see the slides now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about how to apply for resources, and afterwards Valentina is going to tell how to review a proposal in case you are a reviewer of a proposal. So as she said, we now have a new online application system. So until September of this year, proposals through the HPP EBRAINS call were usually written in Word or a comparable tool based on a template that we provided, which was then processed by the different groups. Since September, we now have an online tool for applying and also for reviewing proposals. First of all, since this is a relatively new system, if there are any questions or issues, please don't hesitate to contact our office and we can help you with any questions. The Fenix ICI Collab, so a website in the HPP collaboratory, describes the entire application process in more detail, and there is now also a collection of user guides available for the different groups who need to deal with this system. So the applicants, the reviewers, and also the allocation committee. Just to mention again, the PRAISE ICI calls are still handled via the PRAISE mechanism. So this webinar today is only about the HPP EBRAINS call for neuroscientists. So let's start with the login. If you visit the link, which is on this page, or scan the QR code in the right corner, you will end up on a page that looks like what you can see on the screen, which asks you for an email address. So the system, the application system, doesn't work with accounts and passwords, but with a callback mechanism. So you enter your email address, click on callback, then you should receive an email from noreply@fenixri.eu. And in that email, there is a link through which you can then enter the portal. And it's important to keep in mind which email address you use for entering, because this is essentially your account. So next time you log in with the same email address, you will see the same proposals as the time before. So once you're logged in, on the overview page, you can see the list of all active applications. So all proposals that you have started to work on, which are not yet submitted. And you can also see all already finalized applications that you submitted. New proposals can be created also based on existing ones if these previous ones were already prepared in the online system. This has the big advantage for you that most fields will already be pre-filled, so it's a lot less effort. Such a proposal based on an existing one could, for example, be needed to apply for a renewal, so an extension of an existing project. Unfortunately, if your previous allocation was still submitted using the template in Word, you need to submit a new proposal, although it's not exactly new, and mention in the application that this is based on project XY, because there was no feasible way to import all existing old applications into this online system. So if you already have an existing running project which you would like to extend, which was not done in the online system, you have to apply as if you were preparing a new application and then mention inside the application that this is a renewal. But I'll come to that later again. So the system basically asks the same questions that were asked in the paper-based workflow as well, just now on multiple pages on a website, which also means that if you have already prepared a previous proposal which you would like to extend, you can basically copy-paste from your old template. Applications can be saved and continued later on, and it is possible to switch back and forth between different pages and topics. You just have to make sure to use the back next or save buttons to save progress, to make sure that nothing is lost. As usual, there are mandatory fields are visually marked, and you can find detailed instructions about all the different questions and topics in our user guides. It is possible to submit an application as the principal investigator or also as a person to contact. So you can basically ask anyone from your team to apply on your behalf if you don't have the time to do it, or this is the person who would actually use the resources anyways. In both cases, you have to provide some information about the applicant and if there is a person to contact, about the person to contact. So basic contact information, which we need to get in contact with you afterwards to follow up, like the name and the email address. If there is a person to contact, you have to provide it for both persons, of course. Then you're asked to indicate which project type you apply for, which is easy because currently there is only the EBRAINS standard process. Then you're asked basically all the questions that you know from the previous template, starting with the project start and end date, which just to mention, if you would, for example, submit a proposal today and you say the project should start on 1st of January next year and then run for 12 months, this most likely wouldn't happen because the allocation committee won't meet between now and 1st of January, so they couldn't make a decision. But what we will do is, once we know the actual earliest start date possible, we will then give you the full duration that you've asked for. So if you say my project should run from 1st of January till end of December 2022, but your project starts only 1 month later because the allocation process took that time, we will of course also set the end date accordingly. So you don't lose time during the allocation. If you ask for 12 months, you get 12 months, just the start date might be shifted in both directions, depending on how fast the proposal is approved. You're asked to specify an acronym for your project, the project title, and the summary. So all of these questions are the same as before, and there are usually some hints on the page what is expected in the different categories or questions. But now we have, in contrast to the Word template, strict character limits, which really indicates how much information we expect in these sections. Yeah, then there are some further important points to mention. So you asked about the relation to the HPP. If you're an HPP member in particular, you have to, or you should ideally specify which tasks, work packages this project is related to. It doesn't have to be long. It's really sufficient to say, this is about the software developed in task 5.1, which will be used by scientists in task 1.5, and then you're done. You're asked about preliminary work in case of a project extension. Here it is important to fill this section, although you might prepare a new application. So if you ask for a project extension, but the original proposal was done in Word, the system, of course, wouldn't know that. So this field is never mandatory, but we will request this information from you afterwards if you don't provide it immediately. So if you ask for the extension of a project, you always have to fill this section, no matter if the system knows about this prior proposal or not. And there's also a section about scientific methodology and so on. There are some new but fully optional fields, which so you can specify the categories that your project relates to, where you can, for example, choose neuroscience or biology. And it is possible to suggest names for reviewers, in particular scientific reviewers, whom we could add to our pool of experts to review proposals. It's always good to have more suggestions for us, because in particular for external people, so people outside of the HPP, it's always good to know whom else we could contact, in particular about subjects with a very narrow community. The next important section is which resources you would like to use. And this part is, I think, a lot more handy than it was before. So you see this long list with all resources that are currently available, where you can just tick the boxes of all those which you would like to have. They are sorted first by site, and then you see the different types of resources of that site. And then when you click on next, you will get multiple pages, one for every research that you have, resource that you have selected. So in this example, I have selected use of scalable computing services. So the next page would be exactly about that. And there we would like to ask you to pay particular attention to the descriptions on the page. It is important to make sure that the units which you use in this field are those which we expect. So for example, when you ask for scalable computing services, we typically expect the answer to the question in node hours. In this specific case, the system also has graphics cards, so it's important to point out if you want nodes with or without graphics cards, or as in the example, a mix of both. So just make sure to read the instructions above the input field to tell us exactly what we need, just to avoid that there are iterations where we have to contact you and ask you about this information afterwards. You're also asked to specify the technical details of your project. What kind of jobs are planned, which software you plan to use, and so on and so forth. So there are specific questions asked on the page, which you can just read them and answer them. You're also asked if your software is already used on a cluster or supercomputer, which is especially important for us to know how experienced you are, if you might need additional support, and if your code is, let's say, ready to be used. So if you ask for a lot of resources without ever having used the software in a cluster, the allocation committee might be a bit skeptical. But if you already have quite a lot of experience with your code on a cluster or HPC system, they might be a lot more positive about allocating a large amount of resources to a new project. The next question is if you need onboarding support. So this is additional technical support from the sites where you apply for resources. So if you think that you might need some help to install your software and to get started, you can just tick yes. This question doesn't really have it does not have an influence on what the allocation committee will say or decide. It's really just for the partners to plan if you need additional help. And to the contrary, so if you ask for a lot, you have only little experience, but you don't say you need onboarding support, it might happen that the allocation committee says, we suggest that you also get some onboarding support just to make sure that the project will run smoothly and you can start immediately and don't waste time with issues getting started. The next important question is about the processing of personal data. So if your project involves the processing of personal data, we can't really go into all details of this topic here because it's complex. So if this is the case for you, you'll find more information on the page, which is linked here, and you can also contact us in case of any related questions. You're asked how you're going to manage the requested resources, and if you agree to comply with the HPP data management plan. And then you're basically done. So you can upload a PDF document with additional information, which is technically not needed. So this is really just in case there is anything you would like to share with us or the allocation committee that didn't fit into any of the fields, but it is definitely not necessary. And once you're done, you click on finalize, and the proposal is with us for processing. As I said earlier, you can save and continue preparing your application in between, so you don't have to prepare everything on the same day. It is possible to copy paste information from an existing old paper-based proposal. So it just looks different, but the questions are essentially the same. Do you have any questions to this section?
I can see one attendee that raised their hand, so I'm going to allow him to talk. So, Florence, I think you are able to talk at the moment. Can you make the question, please? Hello? We can't hear you, and you're able to speak.
He wrote in the chat that the microphone is not working.
Okay. So can you then maybe please do the question via the chat, if that's okay? So he has two questions. So the first one says the email callback system is safe. I wonder if you somehow can break it by requesting multiple addresses.
I would like, is it possible to hand or to allow Steffen Graber, one of the attendees, to reply, because he's actually the person running the system. But while you're clicking, I would already say yes. I mean, you basically, I mean, you can enter any email address that you want, but if you don't own the addresses and you don't receive the email, nothing will happen. So you basically get a link through which you can log in for, I think, 30 minutes, if it's your address. If you just put any address in which you don't own, so you don't have access to that email, nothing will happen, basically. Yeah. Steffen, would you like to add anything?
Do you hear me? Yeah, Anna, you're right. That's perfect. Okay.
Maybe I missed the point of the question. I don't see. I mean, there is of course the usual, like any input field could have a potential security issue, but
that's true.
Okay, so thank you, Stefan.
And maybe we can keep him in here until we see the next question, just depending on the question. So credits for the system go to Steffen, who customized it for our purposes.
And we're waiting for the second question. Okay, so here we go. So we have, you mentioned that the project ID of an old project must be mentioned.
Yes, so if you already have a running project, which you applied for earlier through the old mechanism, so an HPP IC project, which you applied through the paper-based mechanism, that had an ID. And the system, since the system, we couldn't import all old proposals, we would have to guess, like based on your last name, you already had a proposal which had a very similar title. So we just ask you, if you now apply for an extension of an existing proposal, that you just mention inside your application, this is an extension for proposal 22. So yes, there is no field for it, because this is just we are now in the period where we are migrating from one system to the other. So you can just mention basically in any of the fields where you think it fits. Like, for example, in the project description at the very beginning, this is an extension for project 22. And we really don't care which type of IDs you mention. So, we have an internal ID which we give to every project just to make it for us easier. And then there are the site local IDs. So if you, for example, have a project at CSCS, you would have an ICH project ID. At the JSC, you have an HPP ICI, so HPP-ICI-a running number project ID. So any of those IDs that you know can just be added basically in any field. It's really just a hint for us as the project coordination office that we know that this is an extension. So it's not, it's really not a big deal. We actually, I think, Valentina, we really don't care in which field we see it, as long as we see it somewhere.
Yes, sometimes we have seen the beginning, so in the description, one of the first field. Yeah.
Okay, so I think both questions have been addressed now. Thanks, Florent, for your questions. So I guess we can continue then.
Okay. So now we will see how to review proposals by using JARDS. So also in this case, there is a login link, but please take into consideration that this link is different with respect to the one used for the application. So you can click on the link, and it's in this case the same as for in the previous case. So there is a callback system. So you are going to this login page, you're entering your email address, and then by clicking on callback, you will receive an email with the subject review system identification, and then clicking on the embedded link or copy and pasting into the browser, you can go to the start page. There are no user accounts, no passwords to remember. The reviewers must be registered by the ECI PMO before the first assessment. So make sure to use the same email address that the PMO has used to contact you. So as previously said, once you have received the mail with the link, you can click on the link, and then you get the start page that includes all the applications to be reviewed and also other additional informations. So you have a first table on the top that is named the collection of your applications to review in call JARDS EBRAINS. There you have all the applications to be reviewed, and also for each application, different kinds of information. So you have the status of the review, name of the API, title of the project, amount of requested resources. And the table at the bottom summarizes how many proposals of which kind need to be reviewed. So first of all, it's important for our reviewer to have an idea about and to get information about the application. So in the table collection of your applications to review, you can click, there is a column called Merge Documents. You can click on Show PDF, and then your browser will open a PDF or offer to download it, depending on the browser configuration. At this point, you can get a PDF that contains the details that were entered by the applicant. And sometimes it's possible also to find a PDF that the applicant may have submitted together with the application in order to provide additional information. It's possible also to get information regarding the application by clicking details in the column project details. There you have a multi-page view directly in the browser. Then you can scroll down and then get all the information. So at this point, once you have so you get all the information regarding the applications. In the table collection of your applications to review, there is a column, the review column, and there, by clicking on Edit Review, you can start to perform the assessment. As you can see, there is an icon on the left. This describes the status of the review. So if it's red, means that no review data were provided. If it's orange, this means that the review was edited but not finalized. And if it's green, this means that the review was completed. So after clicking on Edit Review, you can start with the assessment. You can provide your feedback. And at the end, if it's completed, you can click on Technical Review Completed. Otherwise, if additional information are required, you can save the feedback already provided by clicking on the Save button. So, but which questions need to be answered? It's important to say that both for the technical and the scientific assessment, the questions are the same with respect to the ones provided on already on the paper-based form. They usually the ICO PMO was sending by mail. So regarding the technical assessment, there are questions like if the proposal is technically feasible, with respect to the specific site, so if the requested amount of resources is appropriate, and the outcome of the technical assessment. Regarding the scientific assessment, there are questions, for example, like if the proposed project meets the requirement for the scientific excellence, novelty, and impact, and if the proposal addresses the research topics. At the end, there is the summary of the scientific assessment. And in both cases, so both for the technical and the scientific assessment, there is a field that is optional, and this the feedback not shared with applicants. So there you can add all your comments that will be not shared with the PI or the PhD student. Something that is new is the possibility to add a comment on the proposal. So on the table collection of your applications to review, there is a column with the comments. You can click on add, then you can include your feedback and then add. At this point, the comment can be visible to other reviewers of the same proposal, to the CIPMO, as well as the Infrastructure Allocation Committee. So we would like to inform you again that these resources are open to European researchers, also PhD students, and the usage of resources is free of charge. For any question, you can always contact us, and for any additional information, you can visit the Fenix website. Thank you for your attention. I don't know if there are questions about this part.
So I can't see anyone on the chat, so we'll leave a little bit of more minutes to see if someone has any question. Meanwhile, I would like to thank to both of you for your very interesting speeches and for coming today. Okay, so I think if there are no further questions in the chat, I will then remind again all speakers a little bit about how to access the Fenix services. So there are two options for neuroscientists. We have normally an ongoing and open call, and the HPP and EBRAINS call. It is always open. And then there is also a second option, that is the PRAISE ICI call for proposals, that is also open on a quarterly basis. Of course, all the access to all the Fenix resources are available on the Fenix website on the link that you can see down there. And also, finally, just to conclude, I wanted also to tell all the attendees that it's always to hear about your feedback for maybe other ideas for other webinars and topics, or also how we could improve. So we appreciate if you could then send us your feedback in the survey that we will circulate in an email after this, this webinar. And finally, just to conclude and thank everyone to come to this webinar, I also wanted to encourage everyone to sign up for the Fenix User Forum, as well as stay connected in all our social media networks. And just the final words is thank you very much for all our 2 speakers today, and for all attendees for coming. And I hope I will then all see you again in upcoming Fenix webinars. Thank you.